Hi there and welcome back. This video is part of a series going through a deep house track that I recently finished. In this video I'm going to go over some ambient field recording sounds that I used in the track and also quickly cover a couple of the sound sort of effects and transitional sounds that I used to help bridge one section to another. Here's a quick clip of the track for you. So I think using ambient sounds like a field recording to add texture and colour to a track is one of the hardest things to do. I'm going to leave a link in the comments to a track that I think does it better than any other that I've heard, at least in the deep house genre. It's called 6ix9ine by Soul Minority, and it's just the most amazing track all around. But what I particularly love is how well he makes use of what sounds like field recordings or sounds from the radio. I mean, that's what it sounds like. I could be completely wrong. He might have done it in a completely different way. But it's just a really nice illustration of how you can add atmosphere to a track by using some slightly left field sort of recordings. I'm not going to pretend for even a split second that the way I've used this recording is brilliant, but I did find it quite an interesting experiment, so I'll show you what I did. Firstly, I found a field recording of just what sounds like a reasonably busy square in a city, something like that. I have no idea where it was done or who it was by. I'll have to find the link for it because it will be in my history somewhere. But this is what it sounds like. So I think this is a brilliant recording to use on a track, and there's a few reasons why. Number one, there's no persistent long background noises that are harsh to the ear. There's nothing in the high frequencies that's really sort of nasty to listen to. There's also not any traffic sounds, and that I think is a big bonus. So even though it's taken in somewhere that sounds fairly urban, you're missing some of the more sort of difficult to use sounds. I mean, it'd be very difficult to use something like a truck passing by. What I was looking for was something just with the sound of people, the sound of chatter. The other thing that's great about it is there are a few points in this recording where you can quite distinctly hear one person's voice. And I considered it quite a challenge to find some of those really nice little snippets, isolate them, enhance them, and find a way to use them within the track. I found a section which was just exactly what I was looking for. There was two people's voices that were quite distinct, and I wanted to really hone in on them. And after a bit of chopping and a bit of looping and sort of figuring out where within a 2-bar loop I wanted to put those two prominent sounds, I ended up with this. And this is the raw sound with no EQ or anything. The other great thing about this sample is that it was very easy, because the background noise and frequencies are fairly constant, it was very easy to sort of chop and change bits, reorder it, so I could give that sample a little bit of rhythm that will actually work within the track. So I'll just play it again quickly. And if you hear in that 2-bar loop there's almost a sort of pulse, a sort of rhythm to it, which is, again, what I was looking to try and do. The only thing I needed to do in terms of processing that was just a good bit of EQ. Without the EQ on, there's a lot of low end, and I wanted to get rid of that completely because otherwise it's going to muddy the bass and it's also going to get in the way of the pad sound. So with a bit of EQ, big low cut all the way up to 700 odd hertz, and then a bit of a boost from 800 to 3000-ish. And the boost is there to sort of bring out some of the higher frequencies in the loop of... You'll hear how it works anyway. And it almost sounds like the second person's voice that you hear distinctly is saying, "What's up?" And that's why I really liked this loop. It's sort of... just the fact that they're saying "What's up?" to me, it somehow works. And there's a nice sort of rhythm to it. When you layer it with everything else, I think it adds to the beat. It makes things a little bit more interesting. I think it's very debatable as to whether or not it makes the track better, but I like it, so I kept it in. So the other thing I did with this same loop was when the track hits this section here from bar 49 onwards, everything is a little bit drier. And what I did was I took the same sample and I used the EQ in exactly the same way, but I put an expander on it to really bring out those two people's voices. And I also got rid of... I wasn't using it in a solid 2-bar loop. I got rid of a chunk there, and I slightly shifted the position of the person sounding like they're saying "What's up?" so it falls on the first beat of the bar. Then after that, I also added a direction mixer, and the idea was to basically flip the left and right channel. I know you can do that with the gain plugin, but I'd actually forgotten the gain plugin even existed when I was making this track. But flipping the left and right, to me, just gave it a little bit of a contrast compared to what you hear in the intro. And I think using it in this way helps really mark the difference between the different sections in the track. So this is what it sounds like with the expander and a bit of chopping and changing. There's a lot more space now in the rest of the mix because obviously it's not playing at certain points, and the expander means that the quieter parts are going to be quieter, and it means that I can really accentuate the sounds that I want to, namely those two people's voices. It also now, I think, works better with the beat. So I'll just solo these bits here, and you can hear this together with the beat. So I'm just quickly going to play a short loop of the track with the ambient bit muted and then unmuted. It's very subjective how well you think this is going to work. To me, the track sounds empty without it. Maybe that's because I made it. But I do recognise that it sounds a bit cleaner and a bit crisper as well. I think with it, to me, it just gives it a little bit of an extra layer of interest. And on balance, I preferred it with, which is why I kept it. I think this track does kind of stand on its own without it, but again, it's very subjective, and you know, all of music is subjective, so I kept it. One of the other samples I used was the sound of a preacher talking. Sounds like he's doing a sermon or something. A very old sounding clip, but I quite liked it. So I took a section of it and time stretched it, dragged it around a bit, just edited it in the arrange window here until I was happy with how it sat with the beat. And I thought it would be good to use at the start of an 8-bar build-up towards the drop. So this is what it sounds like in the context of the track with all of the plugins enabled. It's worth noting here, I think the noise gate I've mistakenly left on. I think I'd actually decided not to use it, but look, it's there, doesn't matter. This is what it sounds like.
Our beliefs instrument with thoughts, emotions, and then our actions.
So there's some fairly basic processing on here. The first thing I did was put a noise gate on, but like I said, I think that's a mistake. I don't think it's actually needed. The main, most obvious thing that I've done is just EQ it very, very heavily. So there's a large low cut on, and there's an enormous high shelf to make it much crisper.
Our beliefs determine the thoughts, emotions, and then our actions.
The other thing on there is a stereo spread to just make it a bit wider in the stereo field. That way it sort of sits outside of everything else, and I think it just sits in the mix much better with a bit of spread on. Without it, I think it sounds very sort of strangled, very constrained.
Our beliefs determine the thoughts, emotions. Our beliefs determine the thoughts, emotions, and then...
So that's the stereo spread. After that, there's a little bit of compression on just to smoothen everything out so you can hear every word that's being said, hopefully as clearly as the last one. Sometimes if you don't get things like that right, I find that words that are spoken more softly, because human speech is very dynamic and very expressive often, words that are spoken more softly can get lost in the mix, and then if there's a message that you're actually trying to convey as part of the track, then you lose part of it, and that's less than ideal, obviously. The final thing on here is the tape delay, which I've automated, and what I've done is bypassed it apart from the last word that's said here. I love the sort of tail sound of delay on speech. I think it's just magic. So I used it here to help add a bit of tension before bypassing the delay just before everything drops. And I think it worked fairly well. And it was a cool sample to work with. So there's a couple of other effects that I've used in this track, but they're not really worth going into on the video. If you're going to download the project at the end of this series, you can have a look at them for yourself. And in the next video, I'm going to look at how I made the stab, the sort of main loop, main hook. That's the word I'm looking for, the main hook. And I'll do another video after that which details how I mixed and mastered this track as well. Thanks for watching.